everyone, welcome back. Today I'm gonna be taking you guys on one of my experiments that I normally do, which is to try out different mediums and see which art supplies work together, which ones don't, and which combinations are worth exploring more in the future. While I'm doing that, I also want to talk to you guys about finding my art style and my tips on figuring out your own, because I get a lot of questions about this, and so I just want to take the time to sit down and talk about it. So a lot of us, especially when we're just starting to venture out, tend to worry about finding our art styles, and I'm not going to tell you to stop worrying about it and just let it happen, because I know you probably won't, and neither did I, but people like to think of it as it's your identity, and it's almost something that most people will recognize as yours. But first, what I need to tell you guys is you need to stop worrying about finding something completely new and different, because most of the time it's really not going to be. That was my first mistake when I was trying to figure out my own art style, was worrying that I was doing something that was already been done before, which is really silly, because when you think about it, how long have people really been making art? So the chances of me actually doing something completely new is highly unlikely. And not to say that you're never gonna be completely original, because people are different, but just don't worry too much when you're not. And as soon as this was something that I could fully accept, I felt like I could then finally move on and really did the work in. So I just want to talk about this first little sketch that I did, because I did it with highlighters initially, and I'm using new highlighters. These ones are called the Zebra mildliners. I got these a few months ago and I never got to use them. So I've been trying to see if they work different from the Stabilo ones that I'm used to. I just really love drawing with highlighters. They're so nice and vibrant, but they're transparent, which is their biggest thing, and really love that for my drawings. But so far, now that I'm using these, the best ones that I've tried are still the Stabilo ones. I do think that the color options in this one are better, but I do like the feel of the Stabilo ones more. I do need to play around with these mild lighters a little bit more before I do a review. Also, I messed up her lips a bit while I was erasing, and that part really hurt me, but I think it's because I didn't wait for the paper to dry before I started rubbing in there with my eraser. It's one of the worst ways to learn something about your papers, but this sketchbook is new to me, and I just need to be more mindful of that. So my second mistake when discovering my art style was to assume that I could bypass learning the fundamentals before I could start to explore my own style. Some of the most popular artists today, I'm not talking about the people in fine art, I think they're more called commercial art, but I'm not so sure. So those people that you see that are very famous on Instagram, some of them have very quote-unquote simple styles, which might seem like they're simple because they use simple lines. They're not very detailed, so it's so easy to assume that not a lot goes behind making them, but there's a great amount of knowledge that goes behind what makes those simple looking artworks be very popular among the general audience. And it's something that a lot of people don't know, and there's a lot of knowledge about composition, color theory, mastery in their mediums, stuff like that makes their artworks never be as simple as they look. So a good tip is, so you avoid a lot of frustrations when you're figuring out your art style, is to learn some of the things that you need to learn first. You don't even have to know everything really. You just really need to know enough to build up a solid foundation that you can start on. Like what I did, because I was planning to draw a lot of people, is to learn human anatomy and color theory. Those were the two things that I read about. And again, not really extensive, just enough of a foundation to start with. Very quickly, I'm just going over that bright blue background because it was looking a little too much for me. I did choose blue because it always looks better with orange. They complement each other like that. But I do think the color in the highlighter looked a little bit too loud, and so I mixed a very muted, lighter sort of blue with my gouache. And I just went over the bright blue of the highlighters. This paper, by the way, is not watercolor paper, so it's not really meant for wet media, but I didn't use a lot of water in my gouache, so it didn't warp at all. But for my second drawing, I was planning on using very wet techniques for it, just so I can see how much I can push this paper before it gives out on me. So I think a key point in my finding my art style was studying different artists that I really love and whose artworks I really admire. And this is still something that I still do. I look at their artworks and try to see what about them that I like so much. It could either be the line works or their colors, sometimes their shading techniques, and I try to incorporate that into my artworks. But here's the thing, I never look at those artworks while I'm actually drawing, because then it would start looking too much like their artworks and not like mine, and that's not my goal. I just needed to take note of those things that I like and keep that in mind while I draw and see if those things also fit my style. I think Ethan Becker, you guys know him here on YouTube, said it best when he said that the only original thing about you is your taste. So it really is all about just picking out what you like about other artists' art and building something of your own with them. So I'm gonna talk about this second drawing that I did, because this is the one that I did most of today's experimentation on. I've never tried this combination before, the Posca pens and the watercolors together. I loved the Prima watercolor palette that I'm using, and I wanted to see if I could also use them on non-watercolor paper because I love them so much. I tried them out first on my last video, but my Posca pens, when I tried them first, I didn't really like them. I just feel like they're too opaque and it doesn't really fit my style, but I do want to see if I can do anything different with them, so maybe I can discover something new that I can do with them that would fit my style better. This one turned out to be my least favorite of all three of my drawings that I did that day, and that's okay, and because it's also the one that I learned the most from, and that's a big part of discovering your style and improving with your drawings. I feel like is to accept your feelings as part of the process and just learn from them if you can. One interesting thing that I found out about this second sketch is, well, I used a marker for some of the shadows because it was looking a little too flat and too colorful for me because of the bright Posca pens. It's so weird that the markers, this one is a touch 5 marker, doesn't show up at all on top of the Posca pens, which is so weird, but is an information that I'm keeping for later. Another thing I want to tell you guys is not to worry if your art style is changing. I've had a few people tell me that sometimes their artworks look different from the style that they're going for, and that's fine. I personally think it's okay to have multiple art styles. My big fear is actually looking back at all of my artworks and finding out that they all look the same. So I feel like in the end, your signature style is gonna be what comes natural to you and something that people will start to recognize. Doesn't really have to be one single thing. So if your art style does develop and change over time, I feel like you should just accept it, and it's not always a bad thing. So the biggest thing that helped me develop my art style is what I'm doing right now, which is experimenting with different mediums and different art supplies. I feel like working with your art supplies and finding out their strengths and their weaknesses, using them in different ways, really is what led me to discover my favorite one of my styles. One example is trying out watercolors in different papers, because most watercolor artists will tell you not to do that, but working on normal paper with watercolors really pushed me to not rely on just layers too much. It made me realize that I can also focus on transitions between colors and having the colors only bring out the line work more. Because watercolors, they're one thing that reacts very different with different papers. Like even with just watercolor papers, there's a lot of different kinds. It could be different within brands. Some could be 100% cotton, some are not. And each one of those bring out very different results with your watercolors. So another thing is drawing with things that aren't necessarily meant for art, like drawing with highlighters or regular ballpoint pens. Those things have led me to a lot of my works improving as well. So really just exploring as much as you can. One of my favorite art styles that I got from working with art supplies that I would normally avoid is this last one that I'm doing. I used to hate working with pastel colored pencils. I just don't really like them. I usually go for bold, very saturated colors in my artworks. But what I've found out from pushing myself to use them is that they are perfect for bringing out subtle hints of color for your drawings. They're also very, very buildable, so you can go mild or build them up into something stronger. And also, I felt like because they're like that, I needed to complement them with bright colored ink, like ballpoint pens, brush strokes that are bold and dark. So that is how I came about this art style. So yeah, it's really just all about discovering for yourself what works with your art supplies. So yeah, that is it for all the tips that I have when finding out your art style. I hope you guys are okay with me just sketching on the background, because I really like to do this a lot and just wanted to take this time to show you guys this. I think I will be doing another gouache painting after this one, or maybe talk to you guys about what my favorite art supplies are. So yeah, that is it for this video. I will see you guys soon.